And we are now recording. So, Maddie, did you want to do any welcome, or are you doing other things? You want me to just take it from here? She's on mute, so I'm just going to take it from here. All
Okay.
right. My name is Dr. Laura Granruth. I'm an associate professor in the School of Social Work, and I'm the faculty coordinator for the Center for Civic Engagement. So we work with the Learning Institute within the College of Education and Human Services to put together these policy webinars once a month during both the fall and the spring semesters. So last month we looked at the impact of the Supreme Court decision on people sleeping outside. Um, Obviously, today we're going to talk a little bit about student loans and loan forgiveness and different things like that. And next month, oh, here we go. I think it's environmental justice that we'll give a shout out to the end. So, so welcome everyone. Maddie, when you can take down those the screen. Let me just see. There we go. Thank you. All right. And I'm just going to get myself a little bit more organized. So I am going to introduce our first guest. Our first panelist will be joined by a second panelist soon, Mr. Devin Hill. And as I go in the background here to, split screen it and everything else, it's like nothing wants to work right today with the technology. Um, So Devin, so thank you again, Devin, and thank you for your patience. Oh, there's Tom. Great, great, great. We see you now, Tom. We're just getting started. Sorry for that. I'm Laura Granruth. We didn't have time to say hello beforehand. So, but our attendees are here. We got about 25 people or so in the audience. So we're just going to keep rolling. So I was just about to introduce Devin. So Devin Hill is the director of veteran benefits at the law offices of Goldberg, and Maloney in Westchester, PA. Prior to this, Devin served as a veteran service officer with the County of Chester, Pennsylvania. A U.S. Army veteran, Devin served from 2006 to 2015 with combat deployment to Iraq and Afghanistan. Devin holds a bachelor's degree from Shippensburg University and is committed to assisting veterans and their dependents in navigating the benefits process. So, welcome to you, Devin. And I know it can sometimes sound so trite, but I do appreciate your service, and you obviously were there for some um, significant time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Greatly appreciated.
We are also joined by Mr. Tom Dalton from Ed America. Tom is currently the Assistant Vice President, Sales and Marketing Northeast for Ed America. He brings over 40 years of administrative financial aid experience to Ed America from both traditional and non-traditional higher education institutions. Tom's resume includes the position of Senior Vice President of Customer Relations at New York State Higher Education Services Corporation, which I paid for a number of years, and more recently, Assistant Vice President for Enrollment Management at Excelsior College. He got his start as a financial counselor at his alma mater at Siena College and his first director's position at Albany College of Pharmacy. We're going to have to talk if you're in New York or back there. He has also served as the president and treasurer of the New York State Financial Aid Administration Association and the Eastern Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. Additionally, he has participated in negotiated rulemaking for gainful employment with the U.S. Department of Education. So, welcome to you, Tom. Are you from New York?
I am, yep, born and raised and lived in and around the state, mostly in the Capital District, the Albany area.
Okay.
Yep.
Upstate to us Long
Upstate.
Islanders.
Yeah, yeah.
Upstate. But I have a daughter in Buffalo now, so that's the real
Okay.
upstate.
Yep.
All right. So what we would like to do is I'll go to Devin first and then to Tom. Our topic is just on student loans, which of course means you're in debt or different other things, just to make maybe a 1 to 2 minute opening statement to get us started. And then kind of we'll go back into a little bit of the history of how we even got to the point that students can get in debt. Devin?
Perfect. Yeah, so I obviously I have a small piece of the pie here. You know, I'm a veteran, you know, assisting veterans and their dependents with, you know, mainly disability kind of compensation pensions and stuff like that. But there are ripple effects of that to include things like student loan forgiveness for veterans. So there is a program called the Total and Permanent Disability Discharge Program. It was started in 2008. It was actually called the Higher Education Opportunity Act. Back then it was for, you know, it was the post 9/11 push to help veterans alleviate some of that indebtedness, specifically with student loans that were dealing with service-connected disabilities. So service-connected disabilities limit veterans. It's a small community, but it limits veterans in their ability to, you know, work and to find gainful employment. And they shouldn't be burdened and shouldn't be limited just because they have disabilities and their ability to go through and get higher education. It was actually streamlined in 2019 so that veterans that become 100% permanently and totally disabled, actually, there's a partnership between the Department of Veterans and also the Department of Education that assist and automatically eliminate and discharge these federal student loans. You know, everything from, you know, federal family education loans, Perkins loans, direct loans, things like that. Now, you can do it directly if you file paperwork. That's always the best. You don't want to rely on the government to do everything for you. But yeah, so there is a push to try and help veterans that are struggling with these service-connected disabilities that are rated 100% to discharge all of those loans. And it's a great program. It actually started back in the 60s.
Yeah.
Then it was very, very difficult. It started in 1965. It was very difficult. It was a long process. You had to apply, show the need, all that kind of stuff, but it's become more streamlined now. And there's a
Great.
lot of, you know, there's a lot of issues with indebtedness with veterans specifically that non-veterans don't have to deal with, even though the common misconception is the veterans do get a lot of benefits through the VA and everything. There's a specific set of circumstances, you know, in all different ways that veterans do struggle. So there are programs and alleviations for those kind of struggles and everything. And I'm happy to talk about, you know,
Yeah.
charge as well as, you know, GI Bill, Chapter 31 education benefits, Chapter 35 education benefits, things like that. So I'm well versed in those just from helping veterans for the past 5, 6 years with these types of programs.
Well,
So
thank you, and thank you, and I'm glad you gave that because for our participants, you can begin to post questions in the Q&A if you have them about different things. Obviously, it's going to be like H&R Block, or we may not be giving exact
I say that
advice,
a lot of
but
times I
we
feel
can,
like a VA through this when
yeah,
I help.
yeah, but people can post questions in there. So, Tom, if you could have a brief intro, please.
Sure. So, you know, we're just coming out of this. Um, there's actually 3 cohorts of borrowers out there right now that have never known student loan repayment because of COVID. In March of 2020, student loan payments were suspended. You could make voluntary payments into student loans, but we're now gone through the ramp up period for the last year, and as of October 1st, everybody technically is back into student loan repayment unless you're already or you're still in school or you have some other type of deferment in place. So, and there's been a lot in the media lately, a lot of misinformation in terms of student loan forgiveness. You know, there's been a lot within Congress. The Biden administration has tried to do a lot of loan forgiveness, but courts have intervened, and the latest things that have come out were actually October 3rd. You know, there's if you follow the media, so everything is kind of on hold right now. So students that are back into repayment that are in the SAVE program, the income-driven repayment plan, they're kind of still on hold anyways, as these courts sort out what's going on with that particular income-driven repayment plan, because there's a lot of student loan forgiveness that goes along with that. And the one big thing was, as of July, they would only look at with that if you're in that program, which 3 of my 4 children are involved in. They went to only 5% of your discretionary income would be used in the calculation for student loan repayment. So a lot going on with potential loan debt forgiveness. We would be remiss if we didn't mention the program that's been in place for a very long time, this Public Student Loan Forgiveness Program, which, you know, if you work for a not-for-profit, you can get some of your portion of your loans forgiven if you make on-time payments for 10 years. So that's kind of my
Okay.
introductory.
Yeah,
piece.
yeah. And you too also can see the Q&A, and again, to attendees, if you want to start to post questions or comments there that the panelists or I can respond to. But Tom, I might go to you first. And Devin, I'm thinking as you almost where our history takes us now and our current actions replicating what we've done in history. But Tom, given your long career in student loans,
Right.
do you have knowledge that you can share with the audience of when it first started? And not certainly like to the level of detail that everybody's like, oh, but kind of a, you know, how do we even get to the point that the federal government was loaning money to students?
Well, it actually goes back to the Higher Education Act in, hopefully I get the year right. I think it was 1964. I remember, you know, it was a bank-based product back then, FELP, if you will. And then I think, to early 2000s, direct lending came in, and then it became mandatory, I think somewhere around 2010, where all schools that gave out federal student loans, you know, it was all direct lending. So it really goes back that far. The limits on loans have increased over time. And, you know, borrowers have as higher education went up in cost, you know, students kept borrowing. When I went to college, I know I'm dating myself, but you know, you could borrow $2,500 a year. And
Yeah.
you know, I was fortunate enough. I think I borrowed a total of about $5,500 in my career and was able to pay that off within 5 years. Students nowadays are sometimes taking 20 and 30 years to pay those off. So because of the high cost of higher education, they're borrowing more money.
Right, right. So, and that's part of what I wanted to get to also. So I'll date myself also. I went to a private institution from 1980 to 84, and with working over the summer and financial aid, I had $10,000 in debt.
Okay.
81.28 a month I paid for 10 years, right? And everybody now probably is going on the
Right.
panel. I mean, on the attendees. So, Devin, how about you? Because I think so. Maybe the GI Bill, which started after World War II, that probably wasn't a loan, was it? It was just
No,
I'm going to call.
so the GI Bill actually started in 1944 with Franklin Roosevelt. It was actually originally called the Service Members Readjustment Act of 1944. Going through changes since then, you know, the name has changed to the Korean War GI Bill in 1952. It turned to the Vietnam era GI Bill, and then the more modern in 1984, the Montgomery GI Bill. Revamped program offering more modernized education benefits, service members, you know, with additional support added in there. And then obviously the most recent, the post 9/11 GI Bill, the most significant expansion, and provided broader benefits, including, you know, full cost of in-state tuition at public universities, housing allowance, the ability to transfer, you know, unused benefits to family members, things like that. Personal experience, I don't have to date myself, unfortunately. You know, as recently as 2015, I was, you know, a full-time, you know, student at Shippensburg University and graduated at that time.
We'll forgive you. We'll forgive you.
Okay, yeah. But yeah, you know, even with those types of benefits and everything, veterans have a tendency to maybe not, they're a little bit more independent. They may not know exactly what they're getting into, because I still borrowed more than I actually needed. You know, personal experience, and veterans often do. You know, the GI Bill is there, but sometimes you overextend yourself and you still incur debt and everything. So a lot of people, a lot of veterans think that, oh, I get education benefits when they join as part of their initial contract, but that's not the case. You know, I, just like any other veteran, incurred a bunch of debt not really knowing how I was going to pay it in the future, what I was going to come out. We're not worried about statistics. We're about just getting enrolled, getting higher education. So yeah, it's a great program. I think there's improvements that need to be made, obviously. But it's good to learn about that stuff and talk to, representatives, because there's most counties, most schools, can have veteran representatives that can talk you through that instead of just kind of going in head first into that stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really, as in my role as MSW coordinator, I talk with a number of students who are telling me that they'd be able to use some veterans benefits. And even sometimes it can be very complicated as we're both trying to look at things and be like, what can we do here? So there is that level of complexity that hopefully we can always continue to make it better and smoother. Tom, do you work with veterans at all, or any comments on veteran loan, debt and
Well,
loans?
it's funny, the last institution I was at, Excelsior, now Excelsior University, we
Oh,
actually, out of my office, processed about 9,000 claims a year for veterans benefits. It was, we had 2.5 people working all the time on veterans benefits. So yeah, I got very familiar with veterans and the veterans population that we wound up serving. And it was tuition was very modest, so their benefits could cover most of their coursework for them. And then the other big thing was we accepted a lot of transfer credit at Excelsior, which a lot of military families tend to move around a lot.
mm-hmm.
And so it was, a degree completion program for a lot of students. And so that was actually a wonderful thing. And I think veterans really appreciated that.
Yeah, yeah, and it reminds me, so I'm going to take a look at our questions that are here. So again, if our attendees have any questions that they want to pose, oftentimes in American social welfare policy, we always start out with veterans, as like, let's try this. And
Right.
because veterans are seen as a deserving population because of the service they've given. And then oftentimes, when those benefits demonstrate like, hey, that worked, we begin to move it out to the larger society. So maybe not a big surprise that we went from like the GI Bill to then providing benefits to the larger society. And now here we are now with everybody maybe being in debt. But something that one of you said caught my attention of, they used to only allow you to borrow $2,500. And
Right.
now it seems like that kind of that it's sort of like, well, whatever you need right now. And also thinking about, do we
Especially on
do
the
enough?
graduate side of things.
Yeah. Do
You
we do
can,
enough to tell people what they're getting into?
I don't think we do. Personally, I think there should be more financial literacy behind borrowing before you borrow, and really borrowing what you need. And the Department of Ed has you build a cost of attendance for every student. Okay, and that's pretty well defined on how that is determined. But in some cases, a part-time student may already have maybe living at home. They don't really need to borrow against that full cost of attendance. And so really educating people on borrowing only what they need for their education. The other thing is there's a lot of times when students make a choice on a college and it's really not affordable for a family. And so they borrow an enormous amount of federal and private loans. And really they should be taking advantage of other educational opportunities that are more cost effective, especially if a student doesn't know what they want to do yet. Yes, they want to go on and get a higher education degree, but in those cases when they don't know what they want to do, sometimes community college is a great alternative. And then once they kind of determine what they want, go on to that 4-year public or private institution. So
Yeah.
those decisions have to be made at the family level. And you don't get into this borrowing an enormous amount of money that takes 30 years to repay.
Right, right. Devin, did you have anything that you wanted to add about kind of buyer beware type thing?
Yeah, it's my opinion, you know, being in the military for 9 years and serving, I think there's a level of illiteracy leaving service. There's that transition period from going from, you know, military service, transitioning back into the civilian world, and veterans that start school inherently are older. So they don't a lot of times sit at home with their family and discuss this kind of stuff. It's up to them to kind of take care of it. I think there's, you know, there needs to be a better job for veterans that are coming out with, you know, some kind of
Yeah.
program, officers that explain, you know, these pitfalls and, you know, how to borrow, you know, what you should be looking at. And I also think that when veterans get out, I think there needs to be more, how do I say that? I think there needs to be more personnel maybe available to university to talk to. I mean, I remember the dean, you know, of veteran affairs at Shippensburg and everything, nice guy and everything, but it wasn't somebody that explained these kind of pitfalls and what you're getting yourself into. And I didn't start school, you know, really officially until I was 21 years old. So I was a little bit older. I lived independently. So I didn't have that family to fall back on. I could have, you know, it's not like you know, I couldn't have talked to them, but, you know, veterans tend to be a little bit more independent. So yeah, and I don't know of a freshman or sophomore, regardless of their age, that know exactly what they want to do when they get to college. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's that. And also there needs to be, I can remember specifically being young like that and seeing what I was able to borrow versus what I should be borrowing. And you just see that, you know, you're young, you get that check, the difference that, you know, from what the college receives, what your higher education, you know, institution receives, and what you get back. And, you know, young people have certain things on their minds. There just needs to be a little bit more in place for literacy to understand that, you know, that's all fun and, you know, at the time, but this is going to be something you're going to pay for later on.
Right,
So
right. That financial literacy piece. Yeah, a lot of colleges trying to add that now. All right, let's
yeah.
just take a look at some of these specific questions. I don't know if we all have the answers to 'em. I mean, I know I don't, especially the first one there. Any updates on the Department of Education splitting out spouse consolidated loans so that individuals can reconsolidate with the feds to take advantage of forgiveness?
Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that question right now, but I know it has been an ongoing issue. I don't believe it's been resolved, but certainly I could look into that.
Oh,
Um,
that yeah, and as I mentioned that, each one of you has the ability to drop information into the chat for our guest if there are websites or anything else that you want them to have, that we can do that. Um,
But the second question there, what repayment plans are available to students currently um, in school? Well, if you're in school at least half-time as defined by the Department of Ed, and if it's a graduate program, I believe it's still defined by the college. If you're in at least half-time, you're an in-school deferment, and no interest would accrue on, you know, a sub. The unsubs unfortunately still do. So no payments need to be made. But there are not, unlike when I went to school, I think there was standard repayment and that was it.
mhm.
There's now, I think, 9. I know they're trying to consolidate some of those repayment plans. The newest one is the SAVE plan, which is an income-driven repayment plan. And I encouraged all of my children to get into that because I thought it was the best fit for them. And then the last question, is there a risk of PSLF, public student loan forgiveness, going away? I don't believe that it's going to go away. At least the people that are in it already, I don't see how they could do away with it because, you know, people have been in it. Like several of my children have been in and they've made payments for their 8 years into their repayment for PSLF. And, you know, they have only a few payments left before they get some of their loans forgiven. I don't believe that's going to go away. Some of the administration behind it and some of the rules may change over time, but I don't see that program going away.
Yeah, and so that is the one, let's just back up there a little bit before we do more questions. That can you re-explain the public student loan forgiveness? Because it's got the same words in it, but it's different than what President Biden may be talking about with student loan forgiveness?
Well, with PSLF has been around for a while. I don't know the exact date when it started, but if you work at a not-for-profit, I have a daughter that works in Indianapolis at Indiana University. So she does research there. So she's involved in that program. She's making on-time payments and has made since she graduated from college. And eventually what is remaining on her loan after PSLF, after she's made the 10 years, will be forgiven. And I forget how much she had borrowed in total, but I think it was somewhere around $60,000 with her undergraduate and graduate degree program. So it's a great program, but it is only for not-for-profits. The one thing that's kind of interesting right now, and I think it kind of leads into the next question, is she's also in the SAVE plan, an income-driven repayment plan. So as her income changes and goes up, the amount she's paying per month goes up as well. And you have to recertify that. The one thing that's supposed to have happened with FAFSA simplification is that was supposed to be an automatic link between the IRS and those repayment plans. But I don't believe that's happening yet with all the other complications that's gone on with FAFSA simplification. So, but that's where we are.
Thank you. Thank you. So I think that's good. And actually, as I moved my mouse and I see that we have some additional questions, but that's because these are
So-
policy webinars. The reason what we do these things is that we're hoping to increase awareness that, America, since the GI Bill in the 1940s, has made a determination that supporting the education of its citizens is important. And so with the returning vets, based on their service, there was this. We move into kind of the 1950s and 1960s, we start to see student loans, we start to see the government, doing Pell Grants, different other things. So some would be loans, some would be, and you'd have to pay them back. Some would be grants, and you just got the money, the Pell Grant, that was usually an income eligibility. And then sometimes you'd have other things going on of work study, which would be federally funded, but the student would get a job, and so that would give them money to earn while they were in college. And so I'm working my way to Janie's question because over time we had some things that seemed to be working, and maybe what's missing from this conversation a little bit right now is that we still seem as a society to say that supporting the education of young people or our citizens is a good idea. We haven't really talked about the cost of college and what's happened with that in the past, 30, 40 years. Devin, I don't know if you have experience with that, if you want to take a first response at that of how you're following what college costs from community to Harvard have done.
As far as my experience and what college costs is in
Yeah,
like
just if you just
yeah. I mean, it was overwhelming. Just not just as a person, just taking out even with assistance from my service stemming from active duty time and all that kind of stuff. It was still pretty overwhelming to see how much it costs. I benefited from this total and permanent discharge and all that kind of stuff, and it's the cost is going up so much because I hear what my parents have said. I know I see how much has changed over the years, and I agree with what Janie said about forgiveness of these things and everything. I'm of the opinion if you want a strong country that you live in and everything, educating people in your country to go on to do amazing things and things like that, that's super important to me. I think that student loan forgiveness should be more available, more easier to obtain, regardless of being, veteran status. I know I represent kind of a small sliver of the population, less than 1%, but there's certain people that are kind of, they're not able to break it. Once they, even if they manage to get these loans, they graduate and everything, they may not qualify for any kind of forgiveness or alleviating of those bills, and it kind of holds them back from being, achieving their true potential. So I do agree with that comment.
Well,
Yeah,
and I want,
and
and I'd
go
like
ahead.
to add on to Janie's question there about loan forgiveness. I think fundamentally, the student loan program has to be revamped totally. And I mean, going back to doing a flat rate instead of being tied to a 91-day T-bill at the end of May
Mm.
every year that determines the interest rate. I think we have to go back to, if we want to invest in American education, those loans should be 2 or 3% across the board. And yes, some years with high inflation, that's going to cost the country more when interest rates are higher, but that's how you invest. And
Yeah,
I also,
I
one
agree
of
with
the,
that. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just agree with that as someone who's recently, coming out of college. My wife and I bought a house and everything, and when you start getting those notices and how much the interest is and everything, it is a daunting thing to look at, to see those interest rates. And you're trying to buy a house, you're trying to do all those things, and your student loans that are supposed to help you, catapult into whatever kind of field you're trying to get into. That a flat rate would have been much more, well received as opposed to what we were looking at, initially.
the one provision within the SAVE income-driven repayment plan that I agree with, because we've heard these horror stories where a student has borrowed 30,000 and then, whatever, 10, 12, 15 years later, now with interest, it's now $80,000. So
Mm.
the one provision within the SAVE program that I agree with is if you have a very low monthly payment, there may have been extra interest there. Well, under the SAVE program, that interest goes away instead of accumulating. So, normally under standard repayment, say your payment was $100, but under the income-driven repayment plan, you had only had a $30 a month,
Right.
and there was an extra $50,000 of interest. Well, that interest then goes away and doesn't accrue. So that's one way of cutting down on how much students are repaying. And I do targeted loan forgiveness, I agree with.
Right. So,
So
that's I'm jumping ahead to anonymous attendee 12 who posted at 12:31 under Kim, and we might go back. I'm seeing a lot of things in here. Some of them we may not get to because some of them are very specific of people looking for guidance. Madeline, if you're there in the background, some people are looking for links to apply for loan forgiveness for social workers or other not-for-profit or nonprofit. If you're able to find any of that, if not, we will send it out afterwards. But because it says as an average student, what are the most effective things I can do to have the least amount of debt? And I don't want this answer to sound trite. So one, of course, is the financial literacy and the planning. But the other thing is, to write your legislators and say, this is a problem. I can't afford to go to school. I can't afford to go to a state school. I can't afford this. It's impacting my ability to buy a home. It's impacting my ability to do whatever. Because getting back to if it was Janie saying, why are people against it? People are going to be all over the place. And of course, we want to be able to listen, to respond and understand what's going on. But my student loans of 3, 4, and 5% from the 1980s are way different than the student loans and my $10,000 are way different from the $80,000 that many students are carrying that can be at very high interest rates. So sometimes, a person like me, my age, could be looking and saying, well, I did it. Why don't you figure it out? And we need to, so some current college students, current repayees really need to think of what they can do advocacy wise. And I don't mean organizing a group. I mean calling your own folks and saying, I'm one of these people, and then offer your support for loan forgiveness or your opposition to it. But, kind of when we've done our civic engagement dialogue of or civic responsibilities of learning about it. Because what we are finding out now, so that was a little bit of my on my saying we can't just say, oh, this must be normal, that this is how society acts, and so I guess I have to have student loans, because it wasn't always that way. There are things that have happened in the background with college, state governments not putting in as much money into public education or higher education. There are all sorts of things in the mix, that it's not just like, oh well, things got more expensive. There are some choices that were made, and I'm encouraging our attendees to make themselves knowledgeable on those choices that were made. And now, because they were made, and if you're one of the people who's tens of thousands of dollars in debt and the interest rate is high, now what? What are the arguments that you can make to your legislators to say this is why X amount of loan forgiveness is good, or this is why total loan forgiveness is good? So I think that's where our attendees should really kind of look into um, what works. I know, and I'll try to, Maddie, if you remind me, there's something from on the Council for Foreign Relations um, about if we allow our students to go into so much debt, what's the negative economic impact that it's going to have on other areas of our economy. So I was trying to kind of wrap up a lot of things where we're saying that it's just not as is, but um, who would like to speak? So, Tom, you said something about for partial loan forgiveness. Does that, are you thinking, like you said things about capped
Well,
interest rates? Is that where you would,
Well,
what,
PSLF, I think is a wonderful program. And that does lead to some student loan forgiveness for a lot of students. Um, and then, um, my personal opinion is that we shouldn't wipe out $1.7 trillion in debt across the board. That's just my personal opinion. Somebody else may differ from that. So I say targeted. There's wonderful things, whether you're a veteran or a teacher or you work in a depressed area, or those things I think are absolutely wonderful. And I think, um, that's, and then, if you're in the SAVE income driven repayment plan, hopefully that comes back with all of the, all of the new things that it was supposed to accomplish this past summer. I think, that would be a wonderful thing too, because you can then work in an industry where, money isn't everything. You're making a contribution to society, but you're contributing in another way. And you may not, be getting a big salary, but you're able to then have some of that loan forgiveness. I truly believe in that. I do want to hit Sherry Welsh's question because I don't think I totally answered that one. It said,
okay.
I am 4 months away and now are on hold because of the SAVE plan. Unfortunately, the Department of Ed has instructed all servicers to put everybody in administrative forbearance. Yes, it is unfortunate, but you are on hold until the courts make a decision on that. So that will answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, it's been very contentious going,
Yep.
that Congress, and this is another thing, obviously, we have an election about 2 or 3 weeks away.
Yep.
And the results of that election could make student loans go one way or the other. There are shout outs to student loans in the Project 2025. We have the executive orders that have been put out by President Biden that have been put on hold. And some of it is Congress has not been able to get together to say, hey, let's do, and get a president to sign it. So in the absence of that, the President Biden tried executive orders, which then got shot down by the Supreme Court. Um, but there are also, and Tom, I know you're in New York, Devon's here in Pennsylvania. But the state governments also try to sometimes do some things. We tried really hard to get some of our state senators or their staff to join us on this because of legislation that's been introduced Devin, is there anything that you know about on the state level, or you focus more federal?
My stuff is all federal. Yeah,
Mhm.
I'm accredited on the federal side as a VA, accredited affiliate and everything. So I don't much deal with the state. There are some grants for veteran, or actually veterans, children's and stuff like that that are 100% permanent total, called it's the Veterans Education Gratuity Assistance Grants and things like that. But nothing on the state level. As my previous job with the county of Chester. I did work under the Pennsylvania Department of Military and Veteran Affairs, but the only state benefit that I know of currently is that we call it the Vega grant, the education gratuity grant but that's for your children of veterans and everything. Everything else is federal that I deal with. Yeah, I
Right,
don't have
right.
much insight into Pennsylvania and everything. There wasn't much, prior. I graduated in 2015 from college. I didn't learn about the federal stuff until, 2019 when I started working, and learned about that stuff. So again,
Yeah.
financial literacy comes into play there, but nothing specific that I'm aware of.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I wanted to just double check before I went to Tom with New York. Is New York State, because, and then I can say a little bit about Pennsylvania, just of what I looked into. Is New York State doing anything regarding?
I'm actually up on their website. I'm not as familiar either. I kind of focus more on the
Yeah.
federal side of things. Um, and I'm up on their website right now, and I don't see anything right here now about applications. I think there's some very targeted things where people can apply for them. I think New York, well, HESC anyways, has a lot of very specific targeted programs on the grant side going into college versus borrowing instead of loan forgiveness. So there's a lot more out there, I know, in terms of grant programs that
Mm-hmm.
we're trying to support in New York State.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I just thought I would check because I know as we
Yep.
looked out to some of our legislators, some have tried to do, and they seem to be very targeted, more like the public forgiveness, going into working for the state, working in
Right.
child welfare, working as a nurse, working, different things like that, that the states seem to be focusing more on what can we do to help people out, you know, to make same type of things of like, X number of years of paying it back, and then maybe it goes away or to a reduced rate or anything. But it definitely, and now all of a sudden I'm going to think, how many years do you think this has been an issue? Because it's really hitting now. It's really, really, m- I don't want to say more popular, but getting more news coverage now. But this has been a serious issue with people being in tens of thousands of debt for a while. Would that be an incorrect statement?
No, that's true. Um, I think as everything's tied together. So as higher education continues to climb like this, borrowing has followed very closely with that trend. So students, are borrowing more money to be able to attend those institutions. And that's why I say, sometimes a family needs to make a decision. And yes, you may like XYZ University, that's your dream school, but if the family can't afford that, then a decision needs to be made and say, hey, I think this is a great alternative, and maybe graduate school is in your future there, or maybe the last 2 years of your undergraduate is there. Those types of decisions should be made
Hmm.
by a family, I think, when considering higher education.
Okay. Yeah, and it is. I was looking at some charts also that it looks like the privates have their costs have gone up dramatically. Some of the public colleges trying to hold them steady a little bit more, but they've gone up too. And then some of the folks talking about that when federal money has been was cheaper back in the day, that universities could be like, oh, look, we can charge more in tuition because people are
Right.
just getting money. So it's again back to the financial literacy. I think we're talking ourselves into a lot of financial literacy. All right, let me see what Nikki has posted here. This determines my retirement date. What are chances of age and years of prior? Oh, So yeah, there's another question that I'm like, I have no idea. So the 10 years of payments. So it says, as an older adult who has recently graduated with $80,000 debt, the PSLF only forgives the debt after 10 years of payment. This determines my retirement date fairly accurately. What are the chances of age and years of prior work service together being a determining factor for forgiveness timelines? Well, that sounds like a way to amend the law.
Unfortunately, that is not considered into that determination. It's really 10 years of on-time payments for PSLF. So yeah, that's unfortunate for that individual. So yeah, they're gonna have to
Yeah.
repay that debt if they've retired, even if they've retired. So, but if you're in an income-driven repayment plan, your payments would be lower. If you are potentially retired, you would have less income coming in, so therefore your payment would be lower. So
Oh, yeah. And but it does also remind me, and I don't know why, for some reason, maybe people are taking their questions down, something's happening. I'm losing access to some of them. Um, that would be another thing that people might be able to advocate for changes to the law. Like if I've worked my entire
yeah.
career, for the state of Pennsylvania, for the federal government, for whatever it might be, but I went to school midway through, then, so maybe some of the criteria with student loan forgiveness, maybe right now we're kind of just hitting it out of like all or nothing, because to see the number of 1.75 trillion, and so if that's totally forgiven, then of course it's that's money that the U.S. taxpayers have to make up. It just doesn't go away. Um,
Well,
but
and I think you bring up a very valid point. Higher education is not just the 18 to 24-year-olds anymore. That
mm,
population is shrinking as compared to everybody that's back in there. And as people retool, get further education, that kind of thing. So I think that is worthwhile looking at. How
yeah,
does age factor into this? But that would take a legislative change. Um, but those
I
are,
think we talked ourselves into a good idea though,
I
because
no, I agree.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
so
sort of like Devin coming out of the military, wanting to go back to school because of something that you did in the past. You're now eligible for this here and moving forward.
Yeah,
So
I can speak to that. I can
go
speak to
ahead.
that actually. There's programs for veterans and everything. So when a veteran becomes, is disabled and rated by the VA, once they reach, if they reach that 100% permanent in total, that opens up benefits like Chapter 35 education benefits for their children and their spouse. Now, that doesn't pay tuition. It can be used towards tuition, but it's more like a stipend that's monthly for, as long as the institution approves it and everything. But it creates situations where spouses who previously maybe prior to being married, to a service member that served and qualifies for these benefits, they didn't have the opportunity to go to school. So they want to go to school. And in my line of work, I've had, spouses of veterans that qualify for this benefit go back to school at, 30, 40 years old to try and improve their position. So, and they have to take these loans out and everything, and they have to, they're going to have to deal with that later on. But yeah, there is a higher level, even among the veteran community, of spouses that are older that are, going back to school at an older age. It's not, it's not a movie anymore where you're 18 to 24 and you just go to college. That's what you do.
yeah.
It's definitely changed.
It was fun though. I have to tell you, it was
Yes,
fun. Yeah.
100%.
No, you know what? I always tell my students now with the awareness, whether they're undergraduate or graduate, but I'm probably mainly focused on undergraduate at times, that if they're having difficulty in their classes, to let us know, because we don't want them wasting their time or their money. Let us help you get through this course. Even if you're like, you know what, after this semester, I just need a break. I need this, I need whatever. Please let us get you through this course. Let us do whatever we can, because otherwise you still owe the money, but you
Right.
don't have the course. And that can be really a terrible thing. I do want to say to some of our attendees, if anybody else has specific questions about like, hey, how do I do this? We can always try to pass these on, or or if you're still in school, your financial aid office. Go
Yeah.
meet with the financial aid advisor and say, how do I plan for this? That's the financial literacy piece that we've been talking about. Um, and knowing before you draw down more money of what it means to you, and what else is out there in terms of public service jobs, because right now it's very limited. Not public service jobs. Right now it's very limited in terms of options for getting your debt reduced. Um,
I can
Go ahead.
handle that one question there. During this time of deferment with loan forgiveness, all payments are being deferred and showing 0 monthly payment. Do we have to make up that time? My understanding of it was, while this administrative forbearance, just the administrative forbearance put on during COVID was in place, those payments, those would have counted toward the 10 years. So if you made no payments for the 3 years or so when we were in this administrative forbearance, those should have counted towards your loan forgiveness.
Oh,
Even
wow.
even if no payment was made. Yeah. So I would highly recommend checking with your servicer on that. So that should be the way it should work.
Also,
And
for I wanted to speak on this too. It's in my experience in my line of work and everything. Usually, people, I bet everybody in here that's attending this probably either knows a veteran, could be a veteran, or maybe their parents were veterans or something like that. Make sure that you are asking those people, because there's a lot of things like parents can transfer things like GI bills to student or to their kids and everything if they have not used it. Now there's time limits and stuff like that that they have to, it has to fall within and everything. But make sure you're asking people, that are veterans, if they've never used that benefit before. They may be entitled to use some of those GI benefits, and you can go to the VA website and look, and call them, or you can look up to see what your balance still is, how much, you have to use and everything like that. So make sure you're asking about that if you know someone, especially parents or a spouse that's a veteran and everything. People just don't know sometimes. Students just don't know what they have
right.
access to. So make sure you're asking the questions, especially about financial aid. It's one thing to ask a question about a class assignment, let alone, you're talking about money that you may not even have to owe or pay.
I think that is great. And as our time begins to come short here, I want to all of a sudden hope my earpiece is working. I want to say thank you to Maddie, because I was like, where are those questions going? And she was answering them in the chat. So I appreciate that very much. And it looks like the other websites may be going through an upgrade or something like that, with the student loans. So we might have to, again, I would anyone who's a student, financial aid office, go to them first and find out what they know about what's going on with the federal government, from the new FAFSA to websites, if they're working or not working or whatever it may be. I do want to go ahead, Tom.
I did put the link out there for PSLF, and the individual that had that comment. There is something out there, but I would continue to check back on PSLF at that link that I just provided in the chat, or contact your servicer. That would be the other option.
Okay. And I kind of wanted to end with almost where we started, with the GI benefits and different other things. I see a lot of universities like competing to be military friendly. How do you feel, Devin, that that's going in terms of actually helping vets get what they need without getting them on a wrong track of more debt or different other things?
Yeah, I mean, it's hiring the right people, because not all of these, and listen, if you're going to work at, higher education, you're going to try and help students and everything, more power to you. But I think these, the people in those positions need to be more literate about these things. I was in the military for 9 years. Not only did I not understand any of these benefits leaving after 9 years, but when I got to school, it's just, fill out your FAFSA, here's the GI Bill, here's what you qualify for. I didn't have warnings about, don't overextend yourself. I know you can borrow this amount of money, but there was no, instruction on that. So I just thought that it was par for the course. This is what you did even as a veteran and everything. And I also didn't know that each county, at least in the state of Pennsylvania, all 67 counties have veteran service officers and offices usually, through the county and everything. You can talk to them. You can call the VA. It does not cost you anything if you're a veteran, the son or daughter of a veteran, whoever you are. Make sure you're finding out about these programs. A lot of times it's just, you don't know exactly what you should do, how you should do it. But it is becoming more, it's becoming more normal. Just there's so many veterans now that are becoming, that are college age, the post 9/11, those wars are over and everything. So now we have this group of veterans that are, pretty new to this and utilizing these benefits going forward. So I'm hoping now I've been out for nearly 10 years now and everything, but hopefully it's gaining more and more traction every single day. And hopefully they keep, and as recently as 2019, like I said, when veterans become 100% permanent total with their disabilities, it's now automatic. The Department of Education and Veteran Affairs are, cooperating together. They are automatically discharging these, anything that's owed for these veterans that are, significantly disabled to the 100% level. But it's my opinion. I want to do this, it's something that I would like that veterans that are service connected, regardless of their percentage, for things to be prorated. So if you're 50% disabled, I think there should be a proration for your student loan forgiveness, things like that. So those are just some of my own ideas, but I think it is picking up traction because there's a huge population of veterans that still want to go to school, and just, need to know what they, who to talk to and how to, manage their future. But yeah, I think it is progressing in a way that's good, but still needs work.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate the shout out that even if it's not about education, that every county in Pennsylvania has a veteran service coordinator,
Sure. Yeah.
so that folks on this call know that. Tom, any final words from you on hopes for the future? What different other things do pay your bills, because they'll probably put it on your credit report and you'll never get a house.
I would say, don't ignore your debt. If you can't, or if you're unable or don't have the means to pay that student loan back, be in contact with your servicer, because there's a lot of tools that a servicer has to be able to help you. One of them we've mentioned was, income-driven repayment plans. They have the ability to put a student into deferment. That way your credit history is not dinged, and it, follows you for years. So, be proactive with that debt.
Thank you so much. I think that is great advice. So we are kind of at our 12:58 time, I think, or 12:59. We'll let those be the final comments. So again, for attendee, Maddie, if you want to come back in, I think you're going to talk about that they'll get a follow-up or how to complete a survey. So I'll see if Maddie is there, or if not, there she is. She's coming in.
Hi, everyone. Yes, my name
Hi.
is Madeline Mitchell. I am a Master of Social Work student at Millersville University, and I've been the one emailing all of you. So you'll get a follow-up email with a survey. Please complete it. It really helps us get an idea of how the webinars are going and how to keep bringing you the best content. We also have our third and final policy webinar coming up on November 20th. That is the intersection of environmental and social justice, same time. I'll send some information about that out with the post survey. And I'll also send resources and things that were collected during the webinar, so you can continue to learn more and advocate for policy changes. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.